Hello everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Illusion. This is Kunal aka Chip. It is Sunday evening here in Sydney. Winter is definitely still hanging around. It has been one of those cold days, grey weekends where you look outside, see the clouds, and suddenly staying inside with a coffee feels like a perfectly reasonable strategic decision. Too bad my cricket got cancelled as well. So, wherever you're listening from, stay warm. Today, I want to talk about something I have been asked about many times over these years: building a SOC, outsourcing a SOC, MSSP, MDR, co managed SOC, so many managed services, in source or outsource. We have created enough names for this that sometimes the terminology becomes harder than the actual problem. Right? But before we get into it, I want to make one thing very clear. This episode is not saying outsourced SOCs are bad. SOC is, again, for the listeners, security operation centers. It is not saying internal SOCs are better. It is not saying MSSPs do not work. For many organizations, outsourcing part of their security operation may be exactly the right decision they have made. But today, the point is much simpler. Before deciding who should operate your SOC, you need to understand what capability you actually need. Meaning, first understand what your SOC does for you, what your business, what your executives think what SOC does, right? So, because one of those mistakes I keep seeing is organizations starting with vendor question: who should we choose? Right? What MDR should we buy? Which MSSP is the best? Right? And I think these are, yes, these are some reasonable questions. These are good questions, but I don't think they should be top in your top 3 or top 5 list. Right? For me, the first question should be, what exactly do we need our security operations to achieve? Right? When you ask that question to yourself, the entire conversation changes, isn't it? Think about it. Ask this question to yourself as well. Because for me, a SOC is not one thing. It's not simply a room. It's not people looking at SIM. It's not 20 analysts watching alerts, right? And it's definitely not a dashboard with a world map and several red dots moving around dramatically. A SOC, a security operations center, is a collection of capabilities, right? These capabilities are visibility, detection, investigation, ability to make decisions, containment, incident coordination when something goes bad, recovery, yeah, and you need to know whether what you did actually worked. Obviously, we call it as a lesson learned. And combination of is the security outcome. So before you outsource anything, understand where you already have capability and where you do not, meaning where you genuinely have gaps. Gaps meaning maybe your team is technically very strong, but you cannot sustain 24/7 coverage because obviously people should not be working 12 hours a day. Honestly, some do, but it's their choice. Right? Maybe you can monitor effectively, but complex investigations are weak. Maybe your analysts are good, but you do not have detection and engineering function, or you still have it, but it's not mature enough. Maybe you can investigate perfectly well, but nobody has the authority to contain anything after hours. And you have to rely on call team members, which may or may not even pick up the phone. It's possible. But as you can see, and here, these are all completely different problems. Correct. And different problems mean different solutions. But what I have seen is within the industry, we are looking at one solutions for multiple problems. But what I believe is different problems, different solutions, and that should result in different sourcing decisions. That could be in-house, outsource, whatever it may be. And that's why I keep coming back to capability assessment. Understand what you have, understand what you need, understand what absolutely remain inside the organization, and then step 2 would be decide what another organization can genuinely do better, faster, or more efficiently for you. And then you can definitely have that question, okay, which MSSP, which vendor, who, right? Because if you don't, there is a real risk that vendor ends up defining your security operating model for you, right? And personally, that is probably not the first thing I would outsource. Once you understand the capability, all your subsequent questions becomes much more easier, right? So when somebody says we outsource our SOC, ask them, what does that actually mean? Right? Are we saying that we want a vendor who monitors and triages? Do we want vendor who investigate, who does threat hunting, manages actions? They can perform limited containment, user accounts versus service accounts. Maybe they just support incident response, right? All of that is possible, correct, right? Because this is based on your requirement. But what I want you to understand is the important thing over here is not the label, right? The important thing is where their responsibility stops and yours begin, right? Because that's where incidents gets interesting, right? So let's go to 2 a.m. It's Sunday morning. Your service provider or your vendor detects suspicious activity involving a privileged administrator account. Investigation has begun. Within 10 minutes, they are confident and the account was confirmed compromised. Okay, great detection, really good investigation. Investigation shows, as I mentioned, account was compromised. Their recommendation is disabling the account and revoking the active session. Excellent. Perfect. But they do not have authority. So now what? What should we do? The provider cannot disable the accounts because the action sits outside their authority as per the contract. And it belongs to Identity and Access Management Team. IDAM or IAM, whoever needs to be called, or whatever abbreviation or acronym you used in your organization. Their team gets contacted, nobody responds. Hello, it's almost 2:30 a.m. It's late night. There is no 24/7 support. It is based on call, right? So the escalation part starts, and around 4 o'clock somebody wakes up, and now you see when this person wakes up, they know what they need to do. They have this information about the incident, and they say, hey, I cannot do anything because this is a privileged account. And if I change anything or if I disable anything, it can impact the business because it is associated to a production service. And if we disable it, we might create a business outage. Right? And I need to wake up somebody else to make that decision. Right. And suddenly this is no longer just a security decision. Somebody inside the organization has to decide what risk they are prepared to take. And by the time the account is disabled, it's almost an hour or so. A significant amount of time has passed. Right? So just do a recap. Look at what happened. The provider detected the attack. They investigated it. They notified you. They escalated it. They may have done absolutely everything they were contracted to do. but the threat actor was still active, right? And that is the distinction I think organization needs to understand. The vendor did not fail, but the operating model failed, and that is the really the illusion. We say we outsource the SOC, therefore somebody else is handling our incidents. No, not necessarily. You can outsource monitoring, yes, you can outsource investigation, outsource threat hunting, detection engineering, you can outsource I don't know what else you want to outsource nowadays. Everything is possible. You can even authorize the provider to perform certain containment actions for you. You can outsource somebody to write your own tweets. But somewhere somebody still owns the business consequences, isn't it? Talking about outsourcing treats a lot of celebrities, a lot of big people. They do not have time, so they have actual their social media team posting other stuff. But at the end of the day, that individual who owns the account is still accountable for it. They are the one, if something goes wrong, has to own the consequence if something is typed within that 140 characters, right? That 140 characters can build or destroy careers. It has happened. So coming back to the cyber, at that moment during that incident, somebody still decides whether I should be disabling the account or not, or am I okay to take this production service offline, right? Somebody still coordinates the organizations or the call or coordinates or provides this information when the incident expands beyond one alert, right? Somebody still owns the recovery. Somebody still needs to decide whether this threat actor is actually gone or not, right? The vendor can definitely support it, right? They can perform major or large part of the incident, right? But the point is the accountability does not disappear because we have an MSSP or we have a vendor. And this is where another assumption starts to break down, that 24/7 monitoring does not automatically mean 24/7 response. There has been that assumption as well, right? And you might have someone watching your environment every minute of the year. That's valuable, definitely, right? But if you look at the full chain, a full picture, it is much more larger than that. Obviously, in cyber, you need detection, investigation, decision, then there is containment, incident, coordination, recovery, and one of the most important part is assurance. Someone has to assure to our senior and executive and business leaders that, hey, we got it covered. But in all of these parts of the chain or any steps on the chain, if one of those stops, the security outcome stops with it, right? The analyst may know exactly what should happen, but they do not have the authority to do it. Someone else may have the authority but not be available at that time. And suddenly, your sophisticated 24/7 operating model becomes everything works until we need Chip. And Chip's phone is on silent. So I think organizations should stop asking only, do we have a 24/7 SOC? But instead, also start asking, do we actually have 24/7 security outcome? Because those two are different. Now, about question, do we have 24/7 SOC? Yes, a lot of organization will come and Chip, hey, this is a requirement from our auditors, this is from regulatory bodies. Yes, that's totally fine. But that doesn't mean that you don't ask the second question, do we have actually 24 security outcome? Those regulatory bodies is doing what they are supposed to do. From an organization perspective, you are supposed to do what you are accountable for. And one of the questions that you should be asking, I'm going to repeat it again, is do we actually have 24/7 security outcome? Right? And I have noticed organization or individuals do not like to raise this question because this is much harder question. But I also think it is very useful one. So if I want to give you an example, think about a home security for a moment. Let's say you have cameras installed. Many times you can install the camera and you can watch over your phone, something like this. But there are times that you pay a company to monitor your alarm as well. Corporations do that in their office. So let's say at 2 a.m., I don't know what's this with 2 a.m. with me, but they detect somebody breaking in. They confirm, okay, it is a genuine break-in, and according to the contract, they have to call you. So they call you immediately, and they say over the call, hey, we have confirmed somebody inside your house, inside your office. Unfortunately, contacting the police is outside of our service scope. We are contacting you as per the requirement. You can take the next steps. Now, if you look at this particular picture, technically monitoring work, correct? Right, but as your stuff is disappearing through the front door, these people are just watching it and thinking, okay, I have made the call. The next step or accountability sits with the individual whose stuff is just going away. And that's the real difference. You did not buy, I'm sure you did not buy this company just for monitoring because you wanted someone to professionally observe the burglary and you have recordings, or obviously it can be good for insurance, but I think you bought it because you expect that detection has to lead some kind of action, right? And in that action could be something different, right? And I'm not saying this is exactly same as cybersecurity. No, cybersecurity is much more different, is much more complicated, obviously. But what I meant to say is the principle holds, isn't it? Detection needs somewhere to go, whether it is from the camera or whether it is from a SIM. And this is where the customers also needs to take the responsibility, right? Because I think customer and vendor are two sides of the coin. A vendor can work with the environment you give them, right? If they have endpoint telemetry but cannot see identity, cloud, or network, obviously their investigation will be limited, right? If your logging is poor, their visibility is poor as well, isn't it? If they do not have containment authority, the only thing they can do is recommend. If your escalation path does not work, obviously they cannot manufacture an internal decision maker at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's not going to work. And this is why outsourcing security operations is not simply buying a service. For me and for you as well, it is about connecting two different operating models together. One is yours and other is theirs, right? And that connection matters just as much as the capability on either side, right? The handoff, I am done here, this is you now, has to be deliberate, right? It's very much when we see the relay, the runners hand over the paper thing and then the next person starts running, but without that paper they cannot move forward in the race. The same way, when the provider detects something, what happens next? Okay, when they need or they recommend an action, who is going to perform it? When an incident becomes serious, who takes control? When technical response starts affecting the business, who is going to make the decision? And when you know this, that's what the operating model is. And if those boundaries are unclear during normal operations, guys, honestly, they will become more painful during an incident, and you don't want to do that, right? And this is why I do not particularly like the internal versus outsourced debate. And that's, again, it's because it is too simplistic. Like for some organization, building an internal 24/7 SOCs makes sense, which is completely fine, but for others it does not. At the end of the day, it should be based on what your requirements are, right? A genuine 24/7 operations require much more than just hiring headcounts, right? Because obviously you need leadership, training, multiple expert uh, functions like threat intelligence, detection engineering, quality assurance, so on and so forth. And additional a concerning amount of coffee as well if you are asking them to come to the office, right? A vendor can definitely deliver scale and specialist capability that some organization could never economically maintain themselves, right? And that is not a failure. That's a sensible sourcing, and everybody should do it, right? But the decision should not be simply, hey, should I build or should I buy? No. The second question on your list should be, what capability must we own and what capability can we delegate? And once you frame it that way, the model becomes much clearer. Maybe the provider or the vendor owns 24/7 monitoring and investigation. They retain incident leadership. They manage detection engineering, uh, or you keep it internally. It's completely your choice. Maybe the vendor can isolate endpoints automatically only for users, but requires approval, internal approval if there is a service account, right? I'm not saying there is a single correct model. There is none, right? And there is only a model that works and one that does not, right? But every organization should have their own model, right? And you will normally find out which one you have when the incident gets bigger. Honestly, yes, many models are result of it. There times I have seen organization changing their contracts right after a major incident, or going after a different, or going for a different MSSP, whatever it may be. So think of that initial example I gave for the identity compromised. Like, consider by the time we are waiting for it, it ended up as a ransomware incident, right? At that time, now you want everybody into the incident: endpoint, identity, network, cloud, application, exec, leaders, legal and privacy. Who knows? You need external communication as well, because you do not want your data to be posting outside, and ransomware negotiation as well, right? But but at that point somebody has to coordinate within the organization as well. Your vendor, your MSSP may provide excellent technical leadership. Yes, they can. They will do all the forensic, they will do all the investigation, they will tell you exactly what is happening, and they will provide the recommendation, right? But internally, somebody has to take this information. They still has to connect the security incident to the business response, right? And this is not a limitation of outsourcing. This is what we simply call as accountability, right? And that brings us back to where we started, isn't it? Before you go to the market, make sure you understand the capability you have and what you do not. Please do the assessment. Understand where you are strong. Understand where you are weak. Understand what you need around the clock. Decide what absolutely needs to stay inside the organization, and then decide what somebody else can operate better instead of you. Once you know that, then you are ready to talk to vendors, right? Because at that time your conversation changes completely. Because at that moment or that time, instead of asking how many analysts do you have, you will say, or you could say, here is the capability we need. Show us exactly how you fit into it. Right now you see your questions are, and your requirements are changing as well. And I would still give them, let's say, a practical scenario. Let's say you give them a scenario, it's 2 a.m. Again, you can use the scenario that I have. There is a confirmed administrator account, it is privileged. Can you please walk us through what happens next? Okay, I don't want to see your brochure. I don't want to see your architect slide. I don't know how much detections you have. I don't know how much certificates your people has. Tell me exactly what actually happens. What do you do at that time, and what you want us to do? Right? This is what our capability is. Let's clearly identify where the handoff should be. Right? Also ask what happens if normal path does not work. And if you can answer that clearly, then you have a working security model, operating model. not simply a managed services. Right? Because that's where the illusion sits. We outsource our SOC. Okay, cool, fine. But what capability did you outsource? What capability did you retain? And how do those two work together when something genuinely goes bad? Because for me, the goal has never simply to buy a 24/7 SOC. Okay, the goal is to create, yes, 24/7 security outcome. There has to be a purpose of what you're doing. You can definitely outsource the work, you can outsource the tech, you can outsource specialist capability, right? But you cannot outsource the need to understand how your organization responds when the threat actor is already inside. Correct. So before asking which MSSP should we choose, please start here and ask, what exactly do we need our SOC to achieve? And once you know that, test the entire model at 2 a.m. or during your incidents or tabletop exercises, but not once a year. Try to have it much more frequent. One of the things I also do is, or suggest, run your incident response as similar, understand your operating model from your tier 1 and tier 2s. Just only them, and understand what happens. Right? You can use that with your MSSP as well, because that is when the brochure ends from your MSSP perspective, right? And your operating model will begin. I'm Kunal, aka Chip. This is Beyond the Illusion. Stay warm, and I will see you next time.